Welcome to the RFS series. This first part will talk about the important history events and the people that contributed to the development of rocketry as we know it today. The earliest mention of a rocket-like device was around the year 400 BC. There was a flying pigeon that was made of wood and suspended on wires. It was steam-propelled and it flew around a bit. Later, a rocket-like device called an aeolipile was invented. It used steam as a propulsive gas as well. The steam traveled through L-shaped pipes that were attached to a sphere. On one side, the steam went out the tube and pushed the sphere to one side, and on the other side of the sphere, the tube pushed the sphere the opposite side, which gave it thrust and it caused the sphere to rotate. In the 1st century AD, as you might know, the Chinese had fireworks. Those were tubes that were filled with gunpowder, and when they were lit on fire, they launched themselves upward. Then, when the Chinese and Mongols were at war, the Chinese decided it would be a good idea to launch a bunch of the fireworks at the Mongols. Unfortunately, by the 16th century, the idea that rockets should be used as weapons already existed. A step rocket, which was multi-staged, where the larger rocket carried the smaller rockets, and when the large one burned out, the smaller one continued up. This allowed the rocket to travel to higher altitudes. During the 17th century, Isaac Newton has organized the understanding of physical motion into 3 scientific laws. This helped improve the design of rockets because now people who designed rockets could actually calculate things instead of trying and failing. 18th and 19th century, the British military used highly successful rockets in their battles. Unfortunately, these rockets weren't improving much in accuracy, and researchers all over the world were trying to find ways to improve that accuracy. During World War II, Germany, Soviet Union, and America worked on missile development. During the war, Germans created the V-2 rocket, which they first attacked London and then many other cities. Those V-2 rockets were using liquid ethanol fuel, which pushed them to the edge of space. After the war, German engineers were taken by America and Soviet Union to further research and develop rockets, this time with the intention of space exploration rather than war. This when the famous space race began in the 50s. When it was over in the 70s, the drive for reaching space slowly extinguished. Today, besides America's NASA, other countries have their own space programs such as Roscosmos, CNSA, JAXA, and more. There are private businesses like SpaceX, Orbital Sciences, Virgin Galactic, and many others. Today, we have the International Space Station, ISS. Rockets are launched regularly containing cargo, astronauts, and space tourists. There are 21 active spaceports all around the world. The biggest ones with most launches are Baikonur, Plesetsk, Cape Canaveral, Vandenberg Air Force Base, Kapustin Yar, and Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center. The link to this website I will post in the description. As this animation shows, the number of spaceports has been increasing, but yet only 3 of all these spaceports have ever launched humans into space. Now, if you're still watching, now we're going to talk about the people. First, we're going to talk about Goddard, Oberth, Tsiolkovsky, von Braun, Glushko, Crocco, and Malina. I only picked a couple people. Of course, I could have talked about many other people, but I couldn't fit all that in one video. And for some of you, this is already getting too long and too boring. First up is Robert H. Goddard. He was born in 1882, Massachusetts, and died in 1945, Maryland. He wrote a method of reaching extreme altitudes, which was published in 1919 by the Smithsonian. It describes Goddard's theories, experiments, and predictions. He is famous because he launched the first liquid fuel rocket in 1926. He also invented the gyro control apparatus, a gyroscopic testing device. He is also considered one of the fathers of rocketry. Hermann Oberth was born in 1894, Transylvania, Romania, and died in 1989 in Hermannstadt, West Germany. He discovered the Oberth effect, which states that rocket engines at faster speeds generate more energy than at lower speeds. He also wrote Die Rakete zu den Planetenräumen in 1923. He is also considered one of the fathers of rocketry. Konstantin Eduardovich Tsiolkovsky was born in September 1856 in the Russian Empire and died September 1935 in Soviet Union. He developed the theory of rocketry. He wrote more than 400 works on rockets. He also sketched designs for multi-stage booster and space stations. Then, in 1880, he wrote the theory of gases. He conducted aerodynamic experiments, created the formula of aviation, and then developed many ideas that later were implemented into rocketry. He is also considered one of the fathers of rocketry. Wernher von Braun was born in 1912 Poland and died in 1977 Virginia, United States. He worked for Nazi Germany during World War II on developing war missiles. Then he helped develop the V4 rocket in response to Hitler's order. In 1945, after surrendering his team to America, he worked for the United States developing rockets and continued his experiments. Then he worked for NASA and he designed the Saturn V and worked on other projects. Valentin Petrovich Glushko was born in September 1908 in the Russian Empire and has died in January 1989 in Soviet Union. He developed Soviet missiles and rockets. He also wrote The Problem of Exploitation of the Planets and The Conquest of the Earth by the Moon. In some point of his life, he was arrested and falsely accused of disloyalty and sent to a labor camp where he was forced to continue developing rockets and missiles for the Soviet Union for 8 years. Luigi Crocco was born in February 1909 in Italy and died in November 1986. He was a theoretical aerodynamics and rocket propulsion scholar. He developed the theory of instability of combustion in rocket propulsion. He developed the study of turbulence and collaborated with NASA on the Saturn V. Frank J. Malina was born in 1912, Texas, United States, and died in November 1981, France. He worked for the U.S. Army to develop missiles and designed rockets. He created the theory of constant thrust, long duration. He experimented with solid fuel rocket motors and hydrazine nitric acid fuel. The idea of rockets has been around for a long time, but only since the late 19th century it has really taken off. The world wars have made governments invest in rocketry, and the space race has widely introduced it to the public. Many great minds have been put to work to slowly improve rockets and find the perfect fuel oxidizer combination, into which we will go more further deeply in part 2 of RFS rocket fuel stuff.